Hello everyone, I'm Karen from Sew and Save, and I'm here at my sewing studio in the Ponderosa, and we are working on month 5 of our Fair Isle Block of the Month. Are you excited? I hope you are. I am, because these blocks turn out fabulous. I hope your other blocks are turning out great. I hope you're having fun with them and learning lots and lots. It's really a different way of sewing and quilting, and the blocks turn out, I think, really well. The girls in the class are doing a phenomenal job. Their blocks are looking great. They find it to be not really hard, but it is a challenge. It is something different. It's a little more time consuming because it's something different than you've ever done before, but the result is pretty spectacular, I think. This month, you're going to be making 4 of these 8.5 by 16.5 half Lemoyne stars, and then you're going to be making 1 center star. Yep, that's going to go into the center of your quilt, and it's going to be awesome. So the thing that you want to keep in mind as you're going along is to keep your pieces marked so you know what the numbers on your pieces are. Because what you want to do, what we're doing, if you've noticed, is that we're building on what you did last month and the month before. So I hope you haven't forgotten what you did last month and what you did the month before. If you did, that's okay. That's why we have the video, and I'll show you how to make this work again. But now we're adding some fabrics. Before we kind of had 2 color Lemoyne stars. This time we have 1, 2, 3 colors in our Lemoyne star, and that's going to be really fun. But you need to keep in mind what your center point is and what your outer point is on both of these. And that can be a little bit of a challenge, especially since the instructions are in black and white. If they weren't in black and white, life would be a little bit easier, but really not, because kind of if you're looking at this green and those 2 greens together, they kind of look similar anyways. So the video is going to help you out a lot to keep your points, your center point and your outer point in place, and which is which and where does where go. Where does it go? That's the confusing part if you don't have a video. That was my confusing part on this. So it's going to be a lot of fun this month. You're doing your block. Really, you're just repeating the steps that you did last month and the month before, but you're using some new colors and you're adding in some colors. So we're kind of building on what you've learned before. So let's go over what you need to cut, and let's get sewing. Big list of things to cut this month, but it really does go very quickly. So let me go through the list of things that you're going to cut this month. I usually keep my little cutting list on a clipboard so I don't cover it up with fabrics. I've got my cute little clipboard from Bee in My Bonnet from Lori Hope. I love this. So I usually keep it on here, and then I kind of actually I use this board to show things to you, but I usually kind of keep it up on my book stand so I can refer to it easily, and because I'm always covering things up. And I know my sewing area looks clean right now, but usually not very clean. I probably have 3 or 4 projects sitting here when I'm not doing a video. So this gives me a chance to clean things up a little bit. And so let's get cutting. Here's what you need. I've got to get my list back again, because I can't memorize it. It's a little too long. So here we go. So the first thing you're going to do is take fabric 1, and you are going to cut 2 2.5-inch strips. You can do that. Pretty simple. Okay, 2 2.5-inch strips. Then you're going to cut 4 6-inch squares. Cut them in half diagonally once, so that you end up with 8 triangles. Okay? Set those aside. Then you're going to cut 4 5-inch squares, and you're going to cut them in half diagonally once to get 8 triangles. Then out of the rest of what you haven't cut, you're going to cut 4 4.5-inch squares and put them in a bag and set them aside for month 6. Okay? All right, that's it for fabric 1. Fabric 3, you're going to cut 2 2.5-inch strips. Ready? Fabric 5, 1 2.5-inch strip. I know, what are you going to do with all these? It's crazy. Okay, fabric 5, you're going to cut 4 2.5-inch strips. Fabric 12, 1 2.5-inch strip. Fabric 16, 2 2.5-inch strips. So those are pretty simple, pretty easy to do. A lot of times I'll stack my fabric and cut multiple thicknesses of fabric at a time to do this. Now for fabric 17, you're going to cut 8 6.5-inch squares, cut them in half diagonally just once to get 16 triangles. I know, what are you going to do with these? They're going to be very cool. And then from fabric 17, you're going to cut 5-inch squares, 8 of them, and cut them in half diagonally to get 16 triangles. Then you're going to have some other fabrics that you're going to set aside again after you finish. Hi, Marley. After you finish cutting your 6.5-inch squares, you're going to cut 2 5.5-inch squares and put those in the bag for month 6. Then you're going to cut 4 4.5-inch squares out of what you have left and put those in the bag for month 6. So set those aside, have a little bag all marked so that you'll be ready to go for next month because you're going to use those next month. Okay, so let me show you what you're going to do. Yes, let me show you what you're going to do with all of these strips and triangles. I hope you haven't forgotten what you did last month because you're going to be making some more of those Lemoyne stars. Aren't those fun? The girls in the class theirs turned out awesome. And now we're going to kind of kick it up a notch and add another color to it. Instead of doing 2 colors, you're going to have 3 colors. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to get Marley out of the way, start sewing, and I'll see you back in a second. The first thing you're going to do is to take some of your 2.5-inch strips and sew them together. You're going to start by sewing a number 11 to a number 1, and you're going to make 2 strip sets. Right? You're going to take it and make sure that number 11 goes off to the left and by 2.5 inches. So you're going to take and fold your strip down and start number 1 2.5 inches down from the top of number 11. Make 2 strip sets and press them with your seams open. So we're looking at this with the wrong side facing us, with the number 11 going off to the left. Then you're going to do the same thing with number 11 and number 3. So you will have used up all of your number 11s and all of your 1s and all of your 3s. So you're going to make 2 of these strip sets as well. So you're going to start with number 11 going off this side 2.5 inches. So again, fold your tip down and start number 3 2.5 inches down from the top of number 11. Then you're going to take your strips and you're going to lay them on top of one another. This is a little bit different. If you remember last time when we sewed our strips, we pressed our seams toward one side and then this one was pressed to the other side. That's not what we're doing this time. This time everything is pressed open and you're going to lay your strips one on top of the other. So you're going to lay number 1 on top of number 3, line up your seam lines, and then line up your raw edges so they're nice and flat. So I'm going to do that all the way across and down my strip. So again, this is a little bit different. Make sure you press your seams nice and flat. Use a little best press. Make sure everything's flat and smooth so that you can lay one on top of the other. And don't start thinking. That's what I'm going to tell you. Do not start thinking. If you start thinking about this and go, how is this going to work? How is this going to be sewed together? You're going to confuse yourself. So just do the instructions the way you're being told. So we have 11, the 2 11s on top of one another. The wrong sides are facing up. I have 1 on top of 3. I'm going to kind of move my pins out of the way now. And I'm actually just going to mark my 1 and my 3 down at the other end when I get done. But here we go. So we're going to do exactly what we did before. Grab your Rapid Fire Lemoyne Star ruler. I'll give myself a little bit more room right there. Line the edge of this edge of the ruler up with your seam line. Okay. Then I'm going to use my 2.5-inch ruler because I'm cutting 2.5-inch strips. So I'm going to move it over a little bit so that I get that nice 45-degree angle right here. I have a nice sharp blade in my cutter, and I'm going to recheck this because it moved a little bit as I was going along. All right, right there. So what we need to end up with once we cut all these is 16 sections. So I'm trimming this off, and now I'm going to come along and cut 16 of these as I go along. One, and just continue down this strip, and then you will have to cut through part of the other strip as well. Alrighty, I don't think you're going to use it all. Let's see how many I get out of here. I've got 1, 2, 3 right now. I'm going to line these back up. So I think I get about 8 out of here, but we'll see. Alright, so I've got 3, here's 4, and I kind of keep them together. 5, 6, 7. Oh, I'm going to get more than 8. Here's 8. Get about 10 or 11 out of here. There's 10, 9, I think that was. I lost count already. Here we go. Alright, so once you get these done, go into your next strip and cut however many you need to cut to end up with 16 sets. Alrighty, go and do that. You're going to be making your block look like this. So we're starting out with this, and we have 2 pieces that have the wrong sides facing up, and you kind of look at them and you say, how am I going to do that? So I kind of just laid them out. You have to take one and flip one. Okay, it doesn't matter which way it goes because they're both the same. But you're going to have to flip one to make them look like this. So keep this up on your board or a picture of it so that you can see it as you're making these. What you're going to end up doing, so really what ends up happening is a green goes up against a purple, and a purple goes up against a green. So let's pull one more of these again. So oops, I lost that one. Those 2 were not together. Let's grab 2 that are together. So if you pick this one up, you have the wrong side facing you, flip it right side up. This one is going to now, you're going to have to flip this one over so that they're both matching. So now I have a green up against a purple up against a green. So one more time. I take this guy, flip this right side up, and now flip this one over. I know, you're just flipping. You're just flipping them. So what I kind of did is I laid them out, and then I flipped them together with my raw edges here, because this is the edge you're going to sew. So I kind of laid them out, and then I laid them together so that I could, here's my picture so you can see what they are when you're laying them out. So I laid that one together. So this one and this one, we need that going that way. This one's going to go this way. I'm going to lay them right sides together. This is the edge I'm going to sew. And then I kind of line them up that way. So this is the edge I'm going to sew. This is the edge I'm going to sew. I can flip this going this way. I know, it's a lot of flipping and twisting, and it is okay if you flip and twist a lot. Alrighty, let's get another one. This one's going up that way. This one's going down that way. I'm just going to flip this because this is the edge I'm going to sew. Let's do it again. This one goes right side up, so now it's pointing that way. This guy's gonna flip around. I lay it out to make sure it looks right. Flip it over. This is the edge I'm gonna sew. You could put a pin on here, but you can kind of tell that that's not the edge you're gonna sew. This is the edge you're gonna sew. Alrighty? So now what she tells you to do is take, and I kind of would guess I would go this way, and take a marking pen. I'll take an orange one, see that, if we can see with this, and a ruler, and mark your 1/4 inch seam across the edge of your seam line. So I'm kind of making a mark right here, a 1/4 inch from the edge, and right over the top of that seam line, here and here. Okay? That's where those two are going to intersect, and you want to put a pin. It's a little fussy to do it that way, but it really does work pretty well. So I'm going to put a pin right in the seam. Oops, I'm off camera there. There we go. Right in the seam and right through where that line is that I drew, and then right through where that line is and the seam line. So that's where that's going to intersect. Then I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch that. But let me show you what I'm going to do. I'll be right back after I stitch it. I made my little mark where my seam was going to line up and put a pin in here. And then I just sewed over the top of that seam to sew that together. Now I can kind of pull it back and check and see if that's lining up nicely. If it is, then I'll go back and sew my entire seam. Because a lot of times, you know, if you put a pin here and you start over here, this fabric shifts. And then once you get to your seam, it's off kilter. So by stitching it here, first of all, you know you have it lined up correctly. And then secondly, as you're sewing along here, this is not going to move out of place. It's going to stay perfectly matched. And I just stitch all the way straight across to get my final seam. Let me show you what that looks like. You now have 16 of these beautiful diamond points. Hopefully your centers match up nice and you haven't cut anything cut off and everything is kind of lined up nicely. I found that this was the most time consuming and most difficult part, to get that all lined up perfectly. Now that you have all 16 of these done, it is now time to trim these down and make them into your star block. First thing you're going to do is trim down the outside of your star block. Generally speaking, we've trimmed down the inside. This time we're going to trim down the outside. Take your ruler, and she has some kind of, I don't want to say funky instructions, but she has some different instructions on how to do this. Let me show you a really super simple way to do this. We are going to be lining up the 8 like we did before with the kind of the star, your diamond point that comes up to there. But we want to make sure that we kind of get it on there straight. If you look at the ruler, you've got a line that goes directly through the center of your ruler. Line up this line with the point on the opposite end of your diamond star, or of your diamond star point. All right, so it's going to look like this. Once I put it on the dark, it's hard to see, but you're going to line up your 8 with your diamond angle here, and then I turn it until that line goes directly through my point over here. So get all that lined up nice and straight and trim off this edge of your ruler. This is the outside edge of your diamond. So we're going to trim that all off. So go through and trim off those on all 16, and I don't think I pushed hard enough to cut anything because I'm reaching around the camera and up and over. There we go. So you're going to get all those trimmed just like that. Then I take my little design board and I line up all of my blocks. So, because this is what we're going to do next. I line up all my diamond points because this is the outside of my diamond point. This is the center. This is the inside, the center. I'm then going to take my big triangles and my small triangles, and I'm going to add those. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the large triangles to these sections. If you look at your instruction sheet, right here it shows that. So I have it all laid out exactly the way the picture shows. Once I sew these large triangles onto my diamonds, I'm going to press this one in this direction, that one in that direction. Then I'll come back and sew my small triangles on and press them in the direction that's indicated. So let's go do that. You're going to end up with 8 sets of these. Okay, if you start out with 16, you're going to have 8 big blocks when you're done. We now have all of our diamond points sewn onto our background pieces. So I have the small triangle is pressed toward the diamond point. The large triangle on this one is pressed away from the diamond point. On this side, the large triangle is pressed toward the diamond point, and on this one, the small triangle is pressed toward the small triangle. Now we are ready to trim these down. We have this outside kind of trimmed down already. Now we're going to trim this section. And this is where it gets a little dicey. But let me show you how this is going to work. You're going to take your rapid fire star ruler, and you're going to again line up your number 8 with your little diamond point down here. And then I make sure that I kind of run that center line right through that point up here. Get that all nicely laid out. So now we're going to trim here, and then we're going to trim all the way up to here, but up our ruler ends here. And she doesn't really deal with that, and I'm not really comfortable like just freehanding that. So what I'm going to do is take my small ruler. I took a 3.5-inch ruler and kind of just extended my ruler out, so that when I kind of come along here, I'll put my thumb here, my hand here, hold those all together, trim all the way down, and then I'm going to come back up here and trim all the way up. All right? So all of that is going to get nicely trimmed. All right, go back and trim all of them. Look, you're almost done. Actually, we're going to trim these 2 down, and then we'll sew them together, and you're going to end up doing 4 of these. So right now you've got 8 of these squares, and you're going to start sewing them together after you trim them down, and look at how beautiful it's going to be. Isn't that amazing? I know. Look at what you've done. So let me show you how to trim these down. You can use the Tucker trimmer, but I like to use my 8.5-inch square ruler to do this. And I'm going to flip this around just because it'll be a little bit easier. I'm going to trim this down by using this diagonal line. It's going to go right through this diagonal line, my seam line. And you're going to be pretty much down to this point down here. Oh, but I guess before I say anything, I pressed my seams flat on this side. I'm going to trim out all those little things. But I pressed my seams open so that it'll be nice and flat in here. Alrighty. Now, again, we've already trimmed down these 2 edges. What we're trimming down is your outside. So I'm going to take that edge of my 8.5-inch ruler and put it right up to this edge because this is already trimmed down. We're going to trim off this excess background. And I can see, and I'm going to move this down so that you can see it a little bit better. So you can see as I come right in on this, on my 8.5-inch ruler, I have this 1/4-inch dash line, and I can see, look at, my point is perfect. I've got a 1/4 inch between, I was looking for something to point with. Here's a pen. Okay, here we go. So between my point right here, which is like right behind that 5, but between that point and the edge is a 1/4 inch. You can see my little point there, and you can see my little point right here. Right between that point and the edge where I'm going to trim is a 1/4 inch. So when I sew all of this together, I am not going to trim off those beautiful points that I just made. So I'm going to pull this back out, and I'm just going to take and trim off this extra background that we don't need. I'm going to do that on all 8 of them, and then I will sew these 2 blocks together, and because my seams are pressed in different directions, they're all going to nest as I go along, and I'm going to press this seam open when I'm done, and then you will have 4 of these, and they will be 8.5 by 16.5 going all the way across here when you're done. Wow, what a beautiful block this is. I'm so excited. I hope yours come out just as nice as mine did, and we'll see you back in a second, and we're going to talk about your next block that you need to do. Here is your beautiful finished block. You're going to have 4 of these when you're all done, 8.5 by 16. Now, are you ready for your next block? All you're going to do is repeat. So let's go over how you're going to do that, because this time, instead of making half blocks, you're going to make one great big block in the end. So let's get started. You're going to take your next 2, in your final strips, you have 2 2.5 inch strips of number 16. You have, oops, there's my little guy. You have 1 number 7 and 1 number 12, all 2.5 inch strips. You're going to sew a 16 to a 7 and a 16 to a 12. Remember again that we're looking at this at the wrong side, so you can see my seam here and my seam here. You're going to have 2.5 inches from your left side down to the start of your number 7 strip, and 2.5 inches down from number 16 to where you're going to start your number 12 strip. Your seams are going to be pressed open. All right? Then we're going to do exactly the same thing again, and I'm just double checking before I make a cut. Here we go. Yes, indeed, we're going to make the same size cuts. So we're going to lay these over the top of one another. Again, wrong sides facing up, so your seam facing up and pointing at you. I'm going to kind of get these out of the way. Okay, and line up your whole strip. Again, you're going to need a total of 8 subcuts. It says 8 instead of 16. So here we go. We're going to make 8 cuts. And what happened to my little ruler? I lost him. Hang on, guys. Hang on. You're going to get your, oh, here it is, underneath. Here's my Lemoyne Star ruler, lining up my edge along my seam line so that I'm going to be able to get my nice 45-degree angle. I'm going to take and line up my ruler against that, and then we're going to cut. And we're going to get 8 2.5 inch strips. So I'm using my 2.5 inch ruler, which makes this super, super simple. And we're off. So I've got 1, 2, 3. I have to get the rest of my little strips all nicely lined up and straight. Alrighty. Oh, we're just gonna have a little helper here. Marley just woke up, so I've got 3 of these. She hasn't come into the camera yet, but give her a minute. Yep, she's going the other way. Okay, good. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, and this is going to be 4. 5. 6. 7, and 8. And I like that there's a little bit left on this strip just in case something goes wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. What could possibly go wrong? But we do have some of this strip left over just in case. All right, there we go. So now we are again going to make diamond blocks that look, not quite, that look like this, you guys. So, okay, oops, get it all the way on the screen so you can see it. Aren't they cool looking? Okay, so we're going to make 8 of these diamond blocks exactly the same way as we did before. We're going to slide this down and stitch across. So I'm going to do that and then come back. All right, now you have your diamonds sewn together just like you sewed the last set. The first thing we're going to do now is trim that outer section down. So number 7 is your outer, number 12 is your inner point on your star. So let's just show you how to do that once again. You're going to take your Lemoyne Star ruler. Remember to take the 8 and line that up with the V of your diamond point, and then that line that goes straight through is going to line up with your point on your star point over here, and trim. So trim all of those and we'll come back and we'll sew the next step together. I have all these trimmed down. I have the outside points trimmed down. The inside points are not trimmed down at this point because now I'm ready to put my triangles on. Remember, we just did this a few minutes ago, right? So large triangles go in the center, small triangles go to the outside. You're going to sew your large triangles on first, then add your small triangles. Again, watch the arrows on your diagram as to where to press. This is going to be pressed this way, this guy's going to go down, that's going to go in, and that's going to go out, so that when you sew everything together, it all kind of lines up and just nests inside, which makes sewing these together so much easier. So let's go and do that. All right, I have all of these stitched together. I've got 4 lefts and 4 rights, and now we're ready to trim down the sides so we can sew them all together. I don't know about you, but this set is going together a lot faster than the first set did. Of course, we only have half as many to do because we're only doing 8, and the first time we did 16. So here we go. Let me line these up again for you so you can see exactly how to trim this down. You're going to take and put the 8 right onto the V of this. Once again, here we go. So I have the 8 V mark right up against my seam line on my diamond. I'm going to add my ruler over here so I can kind of extend that going all the way out. And I'm going to trim this edge and then come over. Oops, it moved. It moved on me. Don't you hate when that happens? Here we go. Get her all back right into place. Yep, I'm going to have to retrim that just a little bit. All right, no moving this time. And then we're going to slide up and trim that side. So let's trim all of those. And then we'll be ready to stitch them together. Ta-da! Looking good. We now have 4 of these beautiful, squares all sewn together, and we need to trim them down to 8.5 inches. So I'm going to use my 8.5 inch Creative Grid square ruler. You can see how this is really kittywampus, but not for long. Again, I line my ruler up with the 1/2 inch mark coming along this edge because this is the edge that we have already trimmed. We're now coming over to trim this edge. And by doing that, because it's so dark, I'm not sure you're going to be able to see it. I have the diagonal line going right straight through the diagonal line of my block. And I'm going to trim this down on both edges here and here, and I can see that it's a little crooked here, so I'm going to trim that up as well and just straighten that out a little bit. Sometimes you have to do that. And look at how beautiful this is. Look at, I have 1/4 of an inch from this point to the edge of my fabric. I'm going to do that to all 4 of these, and then we're going to sew our block together. I have 2 of my blocks sewn together for the top and 2 for the bottom. Isn't it pretty? I don't know about you, but all of my little edges are matching up and looking just pretty because everything was pressed in different directions so they nest together nicely. So now we're going to sew these two together, ta-da, and we're going to have a 16-inch block when we're all ready, when we're all done. It's going to be beautiful. I hope yours is coming out just as nice as mine is.